Well, now, it's not very often that lawyers agree on anything, but they all seem to agree that the government's plans for a reform of the criminal judicial system are a disastrous idea. The government's just finished a consultation on its plans, which could mean the number of criminal law firms falls from 1,200 to 400. Wesley Mallin's been examining the evidence.
For centuries, English justice was dispensed in places like this. But over the years, the law has changed and adapted. But lawyers say this latest reform amounts to an attack on the very foundation of the English system. The government insists their arguments are over the top.
This old courtroom is now a museum as part of Nottingham's Galleries of Justice, and some of the other features of legal life could soon be consigned to history too. Lawyers, not a naturally militant bunch, aren't impressed with the reforms and have been protesting in Leicester this week, saying hundreds of law firms will disappear. But how much sympathy are they really expecting?
The ordinary member of the public, if you ask him to sympathise with a lawyer, does have some problems with that, and we all know the jokes about lawyers. What I've been trying to tell people is that we are paid rates slightly less than you would pay to have your car serviced in a non-franchised garage. My young lawyers are not earning any kind of money at all, and frankly they don't go into the business to make money.
The government is proposing to cut £220 million from the legal aid budget, introducing competitive tendering for legal aid contracts and ending the defendant's right to choose a solicitor, appointing one for them instead. Chris Jackson's been through the court system. He's worried losing the right to choose a lawyer could lead to miscarriages of justice.
I have been in trouble over the years and not proud of it, but I've been. And I've seen them. I've seen, people in court that don't know the solicitor, and next minute before they know it, they've been sent down, don't understand why, didn't have a fair hearing, basically the solicitor stood there and didn't fight the corner for them.
Have a seat, my friend.
Thank you.
The kind of service Chris has been used to is part of what Justice Minister Chris Grayling says is one of the most expensive legal aid bills in the world, at £2.1 billion, and it has to face cuts like any other area of public spending.
We face tough times financially. We're still trying to bring down a very substantial deficit, and we're trying to increase spending, for example, on the health service. And to do that, we need to take tough decisions about making our criminal justice system work more efficiently. It's not going to be wrecked, but it is going to work more efficiently, so we've got the money to spend on other things.
Officially, the consultation process is now over. Unofficially, the government says it's still open to ideas. A final decision has yet to be made, so there may be time for a last-minute reprieve.
Well, to discuss all of that, we're joined by Ash Bartier of the Nottingham Solicitors, Bartier Best. He's also chairman of the Nottingham Criminal Committee. Ash, the government says your protests are over the top. Is that true?
I don't believe the protests are over the top. The protests that have arisen in relation to this consultation are unprecedented in that they demonstrate a universal opposition to the government's proposal for substantial reform. That opposition is not only from the solicitors' profession, from the bar, it's also from very senior members of the judiciary, no less than Lord Newburger, who is the President of the Supreme Court.
And you actually believe, don't you, that this change in the criminal justice system here in the East Midlands could actually bring the criminal justice system here to the brink of collapse?
Not only do I believe that, but the resident judge in this area, Judge Stokes, at a comparatively recent meeting, made it known that he was so keen on finding efficiencies and improvements to the system that if that did not come about within an 18-month period, there was a risk that the criminal justice system and the rule of law may collapse altogether.
Well, Nigel Mills, that's some very strong stuff there. The rule of law could collapse completely. We've also heard from senior Conservatives like Sir Edward Garnier, the Harbour MP, who's a highly qualified lawyer himself, saying that he's got reservations about this. Now, the government's own lawyers on the panel of counsel say it could create an underclass with no access to justice. You can't get much stronger than that, can can you? This is serious.
No, I mean, clearly lawyers don't like this, but I mean, we're in a situation where we're spending £2 billion on legal aid and we're trying to take 220 million out of that. So we're not scrapping the budget completely and taking representation away. We're trying to find ways of making a saving. I mean, I think we currently have 1,600 firms around the country doing a criminal legal aid. The plan is to take that down to 6 firms per county. I think it's 6 firms.
So you're saying there's just too many and you just
I think we're trying to find a way of making this more efficient. So actually, this isn't free. This is the taxpayer has to pay this large cost. We end up with cases going on for too long. If we're trying to find a way of having less firms involved, it can be more efficient and more effective. We can get a better deal for the taxpayer out of this, while still leaving the sort of quality of legal advice.
It has to be done,
needed.
is what he's saying.
Mary, I mean, can I make it clear that as far as the profession and both sides of the profession are concerned, there is no fundamental opposition to the notion of exacting savings. We understand the difficulty that the Treasury is in, and we support the notion that proper savings should be achieved. The opposition is based upon the way in which the savings are to be exacted, not those savings themselves.
Let me bring Toby in here. Toby Perkins, we're all facing tough times. Savings do have to be made. Shouldn't the legal service do its bit too, really?
Well, I think as you've just heard, they're enthusiastic to try and support the need for savings. But what we've seen amongst this government's policies is basically 2 things. One, there appears to be a lack of fairness, and second, there's been an incompetence. And so we've seen in a whole raft of things that people that are amongst the most vulnerable in our societies have been treated really badly, have found very difficult things, but at the same time, the savings the government promised they were going to deliver, they haven't done. And I think this is another of those cases where you're going to see people who rely on legal aid have no choice in terms of which solicitor they use. But at the same time, there's a lot of doubts as to whether this is actually going to deliver the savings the government claim they will.
Ash, why should we care about this? Why should we, the public, care about this?
Because the public of the UK have always and continue to care very passionately about the rule of law and natural justice. It is easy, and it often arises in the press and the media, to be critical of a criminal who's committed a terrible, terrible offence. And it's always, of course, going to be difficult to justify the response that arises in defending and using taxpayers' money there. But in fact, the public do understand that natural justice is really important. It is critically important to ensure that when an offence is committed, the correct person is convicted.
Okay, so it's not something you can mess around with, Nigel Mills?
No, no one who wants to mess around with it. I mean, it's about 10 years ago that Tony Blair referred to the legal aid gravy train. Now, I wouldn't choose to use those words to Ash Barty, although I think you make quite a lot of money out of legal aid, don't you? So, I mean, there's been a recognition for a decade or more. We need to find a reform to this system to make it cheaper, to make it better value. Of course, we want to give people the right representation, but I think
is this part of the problem that people assume that lawyers make tons and tons of money, which some, of course, do?
The idea that lawyers make tons and tons of money, especially legal aid lawyers, is fundamentally untrue, and I'd like to just clear that up straight away. It is correct, and readers of national newspapers may have seen certain figures and statistics of the highest paid law firms in the country, but let us be clear, that is not a payment going to an individual. That is a payment often going to a very large criminal defence firm that deals with a huge number of clients and often in various parts of the country. The actual rates payable, and especially to some of my youngest lawyers and my trainees, is absolutely derisory.
So what sort of effect do you think this will have here in the East Midlands?
There is a real risk that the criminal defence service to be provided in this area and across the rest of the country may well be unsustainable. There may well be a collapse. Can I just pick up a couple of things? There are currently 1,600 legally aided firms doing criminal defence law. The Ministry's proposal is that that be reduced down to 400.
Yes.
In fact, that's misleading, because the way in which the competitive tender is to be operated and run could seriously reduce that number to only 38. 38 contracted firms across the whole country.
And what he's talking about is once you reduce it to that and we can't have access to good justice, then where do we go, you know?
Yeah, and there's a danger that where we end up going is firms cutting back all the time to be the cheapest so that they win the tenders, and actually that having a real impact. And as Ash has said, you know, we all want to see people that have committed crimes being locked up, but at the same time we want to know that they've been given the strongest possible opportunity to prove their innocence, because we don't want to see innocent people ending up in prison because they didn't get the right quality of legal support.
May I also say that I'm keen to ensure that victims and witnesses are not troubled by the process. The most effective and the most costly way of ensuring quality criminal representation is to have an experienced lawyer who has trust of a defendant to bring about guilty pleas and perhaps avoid the need for witnesses and victims to even attend court.
Nigel, briefly.
But we're in a consensus here, aren't we? Where I think all parties agree we need to find savings from the budget. Now, you could just go around and just slash the rates again. That just means you've got lawyers being paid less, doing even, trying to cut the corners themselves. We're trying to find a way of getting a better, more effective system here, so you don't have worse representation with worse time. I mean, I think
perhaps the Ministry of Justice could give a little bit more regard to some of the research that's been commissioned by itself.
OK, well, we'll have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Ash Bartia, thank you very much indeed for joining me.